The air hung thick and syrupy over the Cypress Creek Estates community pool, a suffocating blanket woven from chlorine, expensive sunscreen, and the deep, silent resentment of 300 homeowners. It was the kind of heat that made the asphalt shimmer, and the petty tyranny of the Homeowners Association president. Penelope Penny Thorne feel less like a minor inconvenience and more like a cruel, existential joke. Alex, 32, tight with contained frustration, wiped a bead of sweat from his father's temple. "Just a few more feet, Dad. We can set up under the umbrella." Arthur Merritt, a man of 68 who still carried the proud, broad-shouldered frame of the retired history professor he was, shifted uncomfortably in his powered mobility scooter. The scooter, a heavy-duty model with thick, all-terrain tires, was necessary due to his progressive multiple sclerosis. It was also, according to Penny Thorne, a structural and aesthetic blight on the community's shared amenities. "I hate having to use the main gate," Arthur grumbled. His voice gravelly, but his tone resigned. He steered the scooter slowly over the perfectly patterned, non-slip concrete decking. "The lift should be working. It was installed for this exact reason." "It should be," Alex agreed, bitterness sharpening his voice. "But Penny put it on the deferred maintenance list 3 weeks ago, right after you accidentally splashed her Louboutins rolling by the kiddie area." Arthur snorted, a dry, coughing sound. "The woman is a ghoul, Alex. She drains the joy out of life like a vacuum. But I'm not letting her take this from me. I earned this membership. I deserve this pool." It was true. The pool was Arthur's sanctuary. The weightlessness of the water offered him a brief, precious reprieve from the constant, gnawing friction of his own body fighting itself. He was buoyant, whole, and free for 20 minutes a day, and Penny Thorne knew it. She weaponized it. Alex guided the scooter to a spot near the water's edge, where the umbrella's shadow was just wide enough to cover the chair. He positioned it carefully, ensuring the thick tires were well within the faint, almost invisible painted line that Penny had designated as the mobility zone boundary. Even moving the scooter a single inch past that line was, by her decree, a Class C infraction punishable by a $250 fine and a temporary ban from the amenity. Alex had learned her rules the hard way. He'd received 3 fines this month alone for technicalities, so minute they bordered on the abstract. "Okay, Dad, let me get you transferred to the deck chair first. Then we can figure out the entry." Alex began the familiar, painstaking process of moving his father. It required precise physical effort, Alex supporting his father's weight, Arthur providing the meager, focused effort he could muster, and absolute concentration. This moment of vulnerability was a private ritual, one that Penny was about to desecrate. They were halfway through the transfer. Arthur's legs dangling slightly, his hand gripping Alex's arm with surprising strength, when the shadows fell. "Mr. Merritt." The voice was cool, crisp, and synthetic, a flawless product of decades of entitlement and weaponized passive aggression. Alex didn't need to look up to confirm it was Penelope Thorne. "Good afternoon, Penelope," Arthur replied, his face fixed in a mask of polite indifference, a professor addressing a particularly dull student. Penelope Thorne stood rigid, flanked by 2 other board members, Gerald, a nervous man in perpetually too large polo shirt, and Brenda, whose expression was permanently set to apologetic disapproval. Penelope herself was an architectural study in immaculate preservation, iron-gray bob, white linen sundress, and sunglasses that hid eyes Alex knew were currently scanning for violations. She clutched a leather-bound clipboard like a scepter. "I see you've managed to locate the umbrella. Excellent use of the space." Her tone suggested the opposite. "However, I must draw your attention to a rather serious breach of the newly enacted pool deck maintenance protocol. Section 4B. Alex carefully lowered his father onto the deck chair, finishing the transfer before addressing the board president. He stood up, towering over Penny, his shadow engulfing her momentarily. He kept his voice low, a measured rumble. "What section, Penelope? My father is exactly within the designated zone." Penelope stepped back slightly, adjusting her posture. "The issue, Mr. Merritt, is not the scooter itself, but its proven capacity for water transference. Section 4B dictates that any wheeled apparatus capable of tracking water or debris beyond the designated splash zone must be positioned no less than 3 feet from the pool coping. To preserve the non-slip treatment, Alex's jaw tightened. That's preposterous. That rule was literally invented this morning. And if you'll recall, my father hasn't been in the pool yet. His tires are bone dry. Irrelevant, Penny stated, tapping the clipboard with a manicured nail. The potential exists. And your setup, the scooter parked there, the chair here, the entire footprint, is creating an unnecessary bottleneck for foot traffic. Mrs. Henderson's yoga class requires unimpeded access to the northern bench. She glanced meaningfully at Gerald, who nodded furiously. Arthur, resting his head back, spoke with a weariness that belied the cutting edge of his words. Mrs. Henderson has been doing yoga in that spot for a decade, Penelope. It's a 10-foot wide deck. Are you genuinely claiming that my small scooter is preventing a woman from stretching? It's the principle, Arthur, Penelope said, using his first name with sharp, deliberate formality. This is a community built on adherence to regulation. If we allow one member to skirt the rules, no matter how unique their circumstances, the entire structure collapses. You've been given a final warning. Move the scooter back 3 feet, or I will be forced to levy a Class A fine and summon the grounds crew to have it removed. The escalation was instantaneous. A Class A fine was $1,000. Having the scooter removed meant Arthur was stranded. Alex felt the familiar hot rush of protective fury. You won't do a damn thing, Alex hissed, taking a step forward. My father is physically disabled. The accessible lift you are legally required to maintain is broken. We are doing the absolute best we can to navigate your obstacle course, and you're threatening us over 3 feet of concrete. It's harassment, Penny. It's discrimination. Penelope's chin lifted, revealing a thin line of indignation. It's compliance, Mr. Merritt. If your father's equipment cannot conform to safety and aesthetic standards, then perhaps this pool is not an appropriate venue for his recreation. We have a zero-tolerance policy for water tracking near the splash guard. Arthur slowly pushed himself forward on the chair, ignoring Alex's subtle, warning shake of the head. He met Penelope's gaze directly. You know, Penny, for a woman who spends every waking moment obsessing over other people's lawns and pool habits, you seem profoundly unhappy. You've traded your entire existence for a clipboard and a veneer of authority. The rest of us come here to forget our problems. You come here to create them. The words landed with the cold, precise impact of a well-aimed dart. Penny's face, which had been a study in controlled displeasure, cracked. Her nostrils flared, and a dark, volatile anger flashed in her hidden eyes. It was a raw, primal reaction that transcended HOA bylaws. Arthur had seen through the brittle facade of power and named the deep, miserable emptiness beneath. You think you're so superior, Arthur? With your books and your terminal optimism? Penny spat the last phrase, her voice tight with fury, the carefully constructed composure abandoned. You think because you've got a condition, you get to ignore the structure we built to protect property values? She moved faster than anyone expected. It wasn't a calculated assault, but a blinding, instinctive lunge fueled by wounded ego. She surged past Alex, stepping right up to the deck chair where Arthur was seated. The rules apply to everyone, she snarled, reaching out and gripping the back of the deck chair, the part Alex had left unsecured for Arthur's transfer. Alex reacted instantly, shouting, "Penny, no!" and reaching for her arm. But he was a fraction of a second too late. With a sudden, furious jerk, Penelope shoved the lightweight deck chair. Arthur's weight, mostly centered on the seat, was enough to send the chair skittering and tipping toward the water. There was a sickening, horrible sound, the screech of the chair's plastic feet on the concrete, followed by a dull, wet thud as Arthur, unable to brace or protect himself, tumbled out of the chair and fell into the sparkling blue water. Alex lunged, his body hitting the ground and sliding the last few feet on the wet concrete. He barely registered the shrieks of Gerald and Brenda or the sudden, absolute silence from the few other sunbathers. His eyes were only on the frantic, struggling figure of his father. Arthur was immediately submerged. The water, his sanctuary, now threatened to become a coffin. His already weakened limbs were useless against the sudden cold and confusion. He came up sputtering, his eyes wide and terrified, his face contorted in a silent plea for help, before sinking again. Alex didn't hesitate. He stripped off his shirt and dove into the pool, the chlorine stinging his eyes. He swam the short distance to his father, grasping the professor under the arms and hauling him upward. The heavy, dead weight of Arthur's body, combined with the scooter's splash into the pool, made the rescue agonizingly difficult. Alex dragged them both to the shallow steps, struggling to keep Arthur's head above water. He finally hoisted his father onto the first step. Arthur lay there, coughing up water. Alex drove with a speed that felt reckless, yet painfully slow. Arthur, huddled in the passenger seat, was wrapped in Alex's soaking wet shirt and a dry towel they kept in the trunk. His breathing was still shallow, punctuated by a rasping cough. But the worst of the shock was receding, replaced by a cold. Quiet anger Alex recognized instantly. "Don't you dare close your eyes. Dad," Alex instructed, his voice clipped and focused. "Talk to me. What's the name of that firm Gerald's nephew works for? The one that handles the HOA's IT?" Arthur mumbled something about Digital Fortress before another coughing fit seized him. Digital Fortress. "Got it." Alex pulled onto the main road, snatching his phone and dialing. He called 911, reporting an assault on a disabled person at the Cypress Creek Estates community pool, emphasizing the victim was in transit to the emergency room for a head injury and potential secondary drowning. He gave his name and hung up, knowing the police would arrive at the pool, but the immediate goal was the hospital. The emergency room was a whirlwind of sterile competence. They swiftly assessed Arthur. A grade 1 concussion confirmed by a CT scan, mild aspiration pneumonia from inhaling the pool water, and a series of deep abrasions and bruising from the fall. The head nurse, a woman named Maria with eyes that conveyed deep fatigue and deeper empathy, looked at Alex after Arthur was settled. "He's stable. We'll keep him overnight for observation, primarily for the pneumonia. But look," Maria said, leaning in, her voice low. "The way he fell, the injuries, it looks intentional. We've already flagged this as a potential elder abuse assault case per protocol. A police liaison will be by to take his statement when he's ready. Don't hold back on them, son." Alex swallowed, the word assault hanging heavy in the air. "I won't, but I need to leave for an hour. I need to secure evidence or she'll destroy it." He knew Penny Thorne. She wasn't just malicious. She was strategically malicious. By now, she would have remembered the camera and would be on a desperate scramble to purge the footage. The timeline was critical. Alex found a quiet corner and called Sarah Peterson, a sharp-witted corporate litigation attorney who used to teach an adjunct law class alongside Arthur. "Sarah, it's Alex Merritt. I need an emergency favor. Pro bono, high urgency, criminal and civil implications." He recounted the incident in a terse, clinical summary. Sarah listened without interruption. When he finished, she let out a slow breath. "My God, Alex, that's battery, reckless endangerment, and a clear ADA violation all rolled into one. Your father is a witness, but that camera is everything. If she can prove he fell, it becomes negligence. If you have the footage, it's a felony assault." "What's the model?" It was a standard dome, black plastic. She called the company Digital Fortress. They handle the server farm in the pool house. She's the HOA president. She has the master key to everything. She's deleting that footage right now. Digital Fortress uses standard network video recorders, NVRs, Sarah explained, the sound of her typing audible through the phone. They usually have a 24 to 48-hour retention cycle before being overwritten, but she can manually erase it. "We need a warrant, but that takes hours, maybe a day. Time we don't have." "Alex, listen. I'm sending you the number for Dante Reyes. He's a forensic IT guy I trust. He can clone a server hard drive faster than you can open a beer. He's expensive, but if this goes to trial, we'll own the entire HOA, so don't worry about the cost. Meet him at the Pool House Access Road in 60 minutes. Do not engage with Penny. Get the hard drive, then call me." Alex agreed. He left Arthur in the capable hands of Maria and the hospital staff, promising to be back before dawn. The Cypress Creek Estates was eerily quiet as the sun began to dip, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple, a stark contrast to the brewing conflict below. Alex, dressed in clean clothes but still feeling the phantom chill of the pool water, met Dante Reyes on a darkened access road behind the tennis courts. Dante was 30, rail-thin with a backpack full of cables and a nervous energy that belied his profession. He wore all black, blending into the shadows. "The pool house," Dante muttered, not bothering with introductions. "She's likely using a password reset on the NVR console. If she's smart, she's already pulling the plug. We need to be fast. I'm going to make this look like a power fluctuation, not a data theft." They moved silently toward the pool house, a small cinder-block building housing the restrooms, storage, and, crucially, the locked maintenance closet where the server lived. As they reached the corner of the building, Alex froze. A sleek white Mercedes sedan, Penelope Thorne's signature car, was parked diagonally near the pool gate. The faint glow of a cell phone screen could be seen behind the tinted glass of the maintenance closet window. "She's here," Alex whispered, his blood pressure spiking. "She's inside." Dante squinted. "And she's not alone. There's a second vehicle, an unmarked utility truck." Suddenly, the maintenance door opened. Penny stepped out, looking disheveled, her immaculate hair slightly askew. She was talking heatedly on her phone. "No, Gerald, I handled it. I deleted the local cache. I ran the security utility. The footage from that quadrant is gone. The NVR log shows an anomaly, a power surge. It's covered. Just make sure the emergency meeting minutes reflect that Arthur Merritt initiated a physical altercation, resulting in an accidental fall." Yes, I'm issuing the disciplinary notice now. Max fine, total amenity ban, effective immediately. He cannot be allowed back near this pool." She ended the call, her face tight with triumph and lingering fear. She walked towards her car, but before she reached it, a burly, uniformed man with a patch that read Cypress Creek Security Enforcement emerged from the utility truck. "Ma'am, I finished securing the pool area as requested," the guard, a man named Henderson, no relation to the yogi Alex hoped, reported with a grunt. "I bolted down the scooter per the notice. No one's moving that thing without a wrench." "Excellent, Henderson. Now I need you to wait by the pool house until midnight. If anyone approaches that service door, you call me immediately. Tell them it's an active maintenance zone due to a chemical imbalance. Understood?" "Understood, Mrs. Thorne." Penelope got into her Mercedes and drove away, tires squealing slightly on the wet concrete. Alex and Dante remained hidden, their plan now completely derailed. The footage was likely deleted and they had a physical obstacle, a uniformed security guard. "She thinks she got it all," Dante breathed, adjusting his backpack strap. "She deleted the local cache. That's a common mistake. Most NVR systems replicate the feed to a secondary, often off-site backup, or at least a redundant partition. She's arrogant and panicked. She probably just wiped the quick access files. So the footage might still exist?" Alex asked, his heart thumping. "It's a 50-50 shot. But we can't wait until midnight. We have to bypass that guard," Alex thought fast. He looked at the service door, then back at the pool area. Arthur's mangled scooter was still half submerged at the coping, a grotesque monument to Penelope's cruelty. "I have an idea," Alex said, pulling out a small, heavy wrench he kept in his trunk for emergency repairs. "Dante, you wait here. I'm going to create the biggest chemical imbalance this pool has ever seen." Alex crept to the back of the pool house where the pump equipment and chemical storage were kept. He found the main chlorine injector housing, a large, loud machine that fed liquid chlorine into the circulation system. He quickly used the wrench to loosen a service valve, just enough for a slow, visible leak to start. The concentrated smell of chlorine instantly spiked in the evening air. Then, he located the small electrical junction box controlling the pump system and threw the main breaker, killing the circulation system. The pump unit died with a mechanical shudder. He ran back to the front. The guard, Henderson, was already sniffing the air suspiciously. "What the heck is that smell?" Henderson muttered, stepping out from the pool house overhang and walking toward the pump area. Alex used the momentary distraction. "Dante, go!" Dante darted out of the shadows, a blur of black against the pale concrete. He had a lock-picking kit out before he even reached the maintenance door. Meanwhile, Alex walked right past Henderson, who was now staring wide-eyed at the hissing, leaking chlorine injector. "Hey! Stop!" Henderson yelled, turning to confront Alex, but Alex ignored him and sprinted for the door. Dante gave the final, satisfying click on the lock just as Alex reached him. They slid inside and locked the door behind them, throwing the deadbolt. The smell! The pump is dead! Henderson was banging on the door instantly. Open up! Who's in there? This is a restricted area. Inside, the maintenance closet was small, hot, and humming with electronics. The NVR unit was a standard gray box blinking furiously on a shelf. Dante didn't waste a second. 10 minutes, Max, Alex. Keep that guy distracted. Alex leaned against the steel door. Listen to me, Henderson. You need to call the fire department. The chlorine injector is leaking. It's a major hazmat situation. Bull crap! You broke that. Open this door now or I'm calling the police. Call the police, Henderson. I'm already on the phone with them. I'm reporting an assault. Penelope Thorne attacked my disabled father. And you're currently obstructing the retrieval of video evidence of a felony, Alex shouted, trying to inject as much legal threat into his voice as possible. Outside, the banging stopped. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, but for Arthur Merritt, it was a fortress. His mild concussion had been upgraded to moderate, but his mind, sharp as ever, was focused on the framed photograph on the bedside table, a younger Alex, beaming after winning a college debate championship. He was talking to Detective Maya Reynolds, a police liaison with a steady gaze and a notebook open on her knee. She threatened him first. Detective, Arthur recounted, his voice raspy from the pool water and the subsequent pneumonia. She weaponized the bylaws. The push wasn't accidental. It was the climax of weeks of focused harassment. When I pointed out her own misery, the mask slipped. It was an act of pure, petty rage, targeted at my most vulnerable moment. Detective Reynolds nodded slowly, writing notes with a meticulous hand. And you are certain, Professor Merritt, that your scooter was within the designated boundary before the confrontation began? Absolutely. Alex is obsessive about the rules because he knows she's watching. She manufactured the violation on the spot. I'm giving you a statement of felony battery, Detective, not an HOA complaint. Alex stood by the window, watching the city below, allowing his father this moment of clear-headed testimony. He trusted his father's clarity, and he trusted Sarah Peterson's execution. The legal machine was now in motion. The service of the Temporary Protective Order, TPO, was theater. Penelope Thorne was served at the entrance to the community clubhouse. Precisely at the moment she was meeting with Gerald and Brenda to finalize the paperwork for Arthur's permanent expulsion from Cypress Creek Estates. The process server, a lanky man in a cheap suit, approached her with the documents. Penelope Thorne, you have been served. Penelope took the envelope with a dismissive, elegant flick of the wrist. This is ridiculous. More intimidation tactics from the Merritts. Send their lawyer my counterclaim. She ripped open the envelope, intending to skim and discard. But the sight of the official court seal, the words criminal summons and felony battery printed in bold, black type made the blood drain from her face. Her impeccable posture slumped. The paper slipped from her numb fingers, scattering across the imported Italian tile. What is this, Penny? Gerald asked, nervously shuffling back from the documents. A lawsuit. Is it the ADA thing? Penelope's breath hitched. She bent down and snatched the papers, her hands trembling violently. It's a lie. He's playing games. They're accusing me of assault. Look, Gerald, a restraining order. I can't go within 500 feet of that awful man or his son. It's slander. Brenda, her eyes wide, picked up one of the pages that had fluttered near her feet. Penelope, this is from the district attorney's office. This isn't a civil suit. This is criminal charges. And the TPO explicitly names the Cypress Creek Clubhouse as a restricted location, as it's within 500 feet of the Merritt property. A dreadful silence fell. Penelope Thorne, who ruled the community with an iron fist of paperwork, was suddenly stripped of her most potent weapons, access, authority, and plausible deniability. The restraining order, a legal stroke of genius by Sarah, had not just targeted Arthur. It had targeted the clubhouse, effectively paralyzing Penny's ability to conduct HOA business. I am calling an emergency board meeting tonight, Penelope declared, her voice cracking with fury and desperation. At my home. We will vote to suspend the access of Arthur Merritt and Alex Merritt indefinitely, retroactively fine them for the chlorine injector incident, and initiate proceedings to foreclose on their home for non-compliance. They think they can use the law against me? I am the law in this community. The emergency meeting convened in Penelope Thorne's opulent, overdecorated living room. The air was thick not just with tension, but with the cloying scent of Penelope's Victory Garden candles. The board, Penelope, Gerald, Brenda, and Ted, sat around a massive mahogany table. A dozen key members of the community, all friends or allies of Penelope, crowded the room, murmuring with a mixture of righteous outrage and titillated curiosity. Penelope, pale but dressed in a powerful navy suit, began the meeting by ignoring the glaring elephant in the room, the criminal charges. Fellow board members, residents, she announced, tapping her gavel, a ridiculous, silver-plated novelty softly. We are here tonight to address a severe, orchestrated act of vandalism committed by Alex Merritt. He purposefully damaged the chlorine injector system, created a hazmat risk, and physically threatened our security personnel. Gerald piped up, reading from a script Penny had provided. This is a clear violation of CCNR Section 8.3. We propose a punitive, non-negotiable fine of $5,000 for the damages plus legal fees and the immediate, permanent revocation of all amenity access for the Merritts. A chorus of agreement rose from the gathered residents, mostly older couples fiercely loyal to Penny's property value-obsessed regime. They are trying to bankrupt us with fake charges because they refuse to follow simple rules, one resident shouted. Just as the vote was about to be called, the front door swung open. Alex walked in, followed by Sarah Peterson, who carried a slim, expensive briefcase and an air of complete, unshakable confidence. The room went silent. Penelope shot out of her seat. You are violating the restraining order! Get out of my house! Sarah stepped forward, her smile thin and lethal. Actually, Ms. Thorne, the TPO prevents you from being within 500 feet of Mr. Merritt. However, Mr. Merritt is here on official business, as a homeowner and a party to a police investigation regarding your assault on his father. Furthermore, this meeting, convened without proper notice and clearly intended to subvert the due process of law, is illegitimate. She handed a document to Ted and Brenda. This is a copy of the felony charges and the police report filed this morning. This is not an HOA matter anymore, Ms. Thorne. This is a criminal matter. And under the laws of this state, the board has a fiduciary duty to protect the community's assets and liability. Alex finally spoke, his voice ringing clearly through the tense room. Penelope, you are using the HOA to defend yourself against a felony. That makes every decision you sign illegal, and every board member who votes with you complicit in potential misappropriation of funds to cover your legal defense. Penelope was panicking, her power visibly draining. This is garbage! He has no proof! His father fell. There is no evidence. This is harassment. Sarah looked at the board members, her eyes resting longest on Gerald, the nervous man who had signed the disciplinary notice. Mr. Thorne is correct, Ms. Thorne. The community has no evidence except for the video footage we legally secured before you could delete the backup file. She paused, letting the implication land like a thunderbolt. Then she opened her briefcase. She didn't pull out the hard drive. Instead, she pulled out a single sheet of paper. I have here a copy of the Certificate of Incorporation for Cypress Creek Estates, specifically detailing the liability clauses, Sarah stated, her voice dropping slightly, forcing everyone to lean in. It states that the board members are personally liable for any act of gross negligence or malfeasance. Now, Penelope believes the video is gone. But, gentlemen, she said, looking pointedly at Gerald and Ted, I know you've already seen the footage, because the district attorney's office, as a courtesy to the board that hired the camera company, sent a sealed copy of the file to the HOA's registered agent this morning. You knew the truth before you walked into this meeting tonight? Gerald's face went from pale to ghostly white. He looked at Penelope with pure terror. Ted, the quiet committee member, dropped his head into his hands. They had seen the video, the unedited, brutal truth of their president shoving a disabled man, and Penelope had told them to vote to fine the victim for a self-inflicted fall. Gerald. Ted! Penelope hissed, her eyes wide with betrayal. "You didn't tell me you saw it?" Gerald stammered, his composure completely gone. I saw it, Penny. It's not what you said." "You pushed him!" "It's on video. We can't vote on this." "The liability, Penelope? The HOA could lose everything." Brenda, finally finding her spine, stood up, shaking her head. "My husband told me. The police were at our house asking about the camera. Penelope, this is wrong. You put this entire community at risk for your ego." Penelope Thorne was isolated, betrayed by her lieutenants. Her base of power, the board, had just crumbled. Sarah delivered the final devastating blow. "Mr. Gerald, as the vice president, I believe you have the authority to call for a vote of no confidence in your president, based on grounds of malfeasance, misappropriation of corporate power, and initiating criminal liability against the association." Gerald looked at the devastated face of his president, then at the confident, powerful faces of Alex and Sarah. He looked at the sheet of paper detailing the felony charges. He knew what he had to do to save his own home. He picked up the silver-plated gavel, Penelope's symbol of power, and slammed it down. A decisive, echoing crack in the dead silence of the living room. "I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in the president." Penelope Thorne. The vote was swift and unanimous. Gerald, Brenda, and Ted all raised their hands against her. Penelope Thorne, the undisputed ruler of Cypress Creek Estates for 8 years, was now officially deposed. She stood alone in her expensive living room, the color draining from her face as the weight of karma crushed her petty kingdom. Her reign had The immediate aftermath of the vote of no confidence was less a political shift and more a seismic event that fractured the delicate social structure of Cypress Creek Estates. Penelope Thorne, stripped of her gavel and her self-proclaimed authority, did not vanish. She retreated into her lavish home, a self-imposed exile that lasted exactly 72 hours, fueled by white wine and frantic phone calls to her legal team. Her new lawyer, Cassian Vance, was everything Penelope had once aspired to be: ruthless, impeccably tailored, and utterly devoid of empathy. Vance specialized in reputation management and insulating the wealthy from the consequences of their emotional outbursts. His strategy was simple, if brutal: paint Arthur Merritt as a manipulative, attention-seeking invalid, and Alex as a financially desperate opportunist staging a public spectacle. "We will concede that physical contact occurred," Vance said, his voice smooth and cold over the speakerphone, while Penelope paced her living room, leaving scorch marks on the antique Persian rug. "But we will argue provocation, confusion, and a gross overreaction by the Merritts designed to extort the HOA through frivolous criminal complaints and the pending civil suit. We need to create reasonable doubt that you intended to cause grievous bodily harm. The goal of the preliminary hearing is simple: keep this from going to a full felony trial. Get it knocked down to simple misdemeanor battery." "But the video, Cassian!" Penelope shrieked, clutching a silk scarf. "Everyone has seen it. Gerald practically wept on the phone when I called him a sniveling traitor." "The board members who saw the DA's courtesy copy of the video are now facing their own liability issues," Vance countered calmly. "They will be forced to recant or obfuscate to protect the association. The video, for now, is sealed evidence only shown to the board. It has not been shown in open court. That is our advantage. We control the narrative until the moment that footage is played for the judge." Penelope, galvanized by the return of a sense of control, began her silent war. She couldn't approach the Merritts due to the TPO, but her dwindling loyalists were under no such restriction. Alex, now functioning as his father's full-time caregiver, found himself living under siege. Hate mail began arriving. Anonymous notes slipped into the mailbox denouncing him as a poolside extortionist. His car was keyed in the grocery store parking lot. One morning, Alex found his father's old, broken mobility scooter, the mangled artifact from the incident that still sat near the pool house, dumped on their front lawn, draped with a bright red sash that read, "For sale, 5,000 payout guarantee." It was a clear, coordinated message from Penelope's remaining echo chamber, meant to humiliate. Alex, however, simply called the new interim HOA vice president, Gerald, who was desperate to prove his newfound loyalty to reason. "Gerald," Alex said, his tone utterly professional. "This is a violation of the TPO, as it constitutes harassment stemming directly from the assault. Also, this item, a piece of community evidence, is sitting on my private property. If the board does not remove it within the hour, I will personally charge the HOA for the storage and protection of evidence." On top of reporting the TPO violation to Detective Reynolds, Gerald, paralyzed by the threat of further legal entanglement, scrambled to send a work crew. The scooter was silently retrieved within 30 minutes, demonstrating to the community that Penelope's influence had truly evaporated. Arthur was recovering steadily at home, but the emotional scars were deeper than the physical ones. The fall, the feeling of utter helplessness, had shaken the foundation of his quiet dignity. "It's the humiliation, Alex," Arthur confessed one afternoon, staring out the window at the familiar, manicured lawn that felt so alien now. "She didn't just push me. She was trying to shove me back into my box. She saw the MS, she saw the scooter, and she decided I was less than human, less deserving of the sun. The thought that she might get away with reducing me to a punchline, I can't tolerate it." "She won't, Dad," Alex said, massaging his father's shoulder. "Sarah has the video. The truth is irrefutable. We just have to get through the preliminary hearing. That's the moment the DA shows the judge why this is a felony and not a misdemeanor. And the moment that video enters the public record. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived, 2 weeks after the assault. The courtroom was small, stuffy, and packed with residents of Cypress Creek Estates, some supporting the merits, but most, including Gerald and Brenda, now acting as witnesses, looking terrified of the legal crossfire. Alex and Arthur sat on one side, Arthur in a standard wheelchair, upright and composed, next to Sarah Peterson, who looked like she was about to present a billion-dollar merger case. Not a petty neighborhood dispute. On the other side, Penelope Thorne was a portrait of calculated innocence, a soft gray suit, hair perfectly coiled and a placid, falsely serene expression. Cassian Vance, her lawyer, was a master of the theatrical sigh and the condescending headshake, attempting to project an image of a decent woman being persecuted. Vance began with a motion to suppress the video evidence, arguing that Alex's trespass and vandalism of the pool house made the footage illegally obtained and that its emotional content would unduly prejudice the court. The DA, a young razor-sharp prosecutor named Marcus Chen, swiftly countered. The video was secured from the HOA's own NVR system, which recorded the evidence in a public space, Chen argued, his voice ringing with legal authority. The defense of the evidence was necessitated by the defendant's immediate attempt to destroy it. Furthermore, we submit that the video is the only untainted witness to this horrific crime. There is no better evidence of intent. The judge, Justice Helena Hayes, a woman known for her no-nonsense demeanor, denied the motion to suppress. "The court will view the evidence. Mr. Chen, proceed with the exhibit." The courtroom lights dimmed. A large screen descended. All eyes turned to the projected image, the sun-drenched pool deck, the vivid blue water, and the quiet, almost domestic beginning of the confrontation. The air in the room was sucked out as the scene unfolded. The audience watched in agonizing silence. Arthur and Alex's careful transfer, Penelope's rigid, self-important approach, the argument over the 3 feet of concrete. When Penelope's face twisted in that moment of pure, blinding rage, a collective, involuntary gasp swept through the gallery. Then came the climax. Penelope's sudden lunge, the furious shove of the chair, the soundless, violent tumbling of Arthur Merritt's body, and the splash of water that looked on the screen like a geyser of injustice. The video didn't just show an accident. It showed a vicious, intentional act of malice, followed by Penelope standing motionless over her victim. The raw, undeniable truth, magnified 10 times on the courtroom screen, was devastating. Cassian Vance, who had been leaning back in his chair with a bored expression, sat forward abruptly, his composure momentarily cracked. He hadn't just relied on Penelope's denial. He had been given a sanitized version of the facts. Seeing the intent so clearly visible on his client's face was a professional shock. But the most compelling reaction came from Penelope. She had seen the footage, but always on a small screen, in private, wrapped in her own denial. Seeing it now, projected huge and irrefutable, judged by strangers, the reality of what she had done crashed down. She went rigid, her face draining of all color, her serene mask shattering. She stared at the screen, not with denial, but with the cold, absolute shock of self-recognition. It was the moment she realized she was not just an embattled HOA president, but a criminal. When the video cut off, the silence was absolute. The only sound was Justice Hayes setting down her pen. "Mr. Vance," the judge stated, her voice heavy with distaste, "do you still maintain that this incident constitutes an accidental fall during a community dispute?" Vance scrambled, trying to regain his footing. "Your Honor, we maintain that Ms. Thorne was under extreme duress from repeated provocation, and that the contact, while regrettable, was not predicated on a specific intent to cause." The video speaks for itself. "Mr. Vance," Judge Hayes cut him off sharply. She looked directly at Penelope, who was now trembling visibly. "The court finds ample probable cause to proceed with the charge of felony battery on an elderly or disabled person. Furthermore, considering the defendant's documented attempts to destroy evidence and her continued pattern of harassment, the temporary protective order will be made permanent pending trial." She slammed her gavel down, a sound infinitely heavier and more real than Penelope's novelty silver one. "Bail is revoked. Ms. Thorne, you are remanded into custody immediately." The shock in the courtroom was palpable. But for Alex, watching Penelope's horrified, disbelieving face as the bailiff approached her, it was a moment of profound, quiet irony. The woman who had ruled her community by fiat and intimidation was finally forced to conform to the ultimate, inescapable rule of law. The trial of the people versus Penelope Thorne was not a quick affair, but a grinding, exhaustive process that spanned 2 weeks. The legal proceedings stripped away every pretense of community politeness, exposing the deep, toxic rift in Cypress Creek Estates. The courtroom became a theater of reckoning, where a privileged life of paperwork tyranny was finally forced to submit to the blunt reality of evidence and consequence. Penelope Thorne was out on bail, an astronomical sum that required her to mortgage a second property. She entered the courtroom each day looking thinner, her expensive clothes hanging loosely on her frame, the perpetual scowl etched deeper by sleepless nights and public shame. Her lawyer, Cassian Vance, deployed the defense strategy he had promised: character assassination and weaponized ambiguity. "The prosecution wants you to see a monster," Vance sneered during his opening statement to the jury. "We will show you a stressed community leader, attempting to enforce safety regulations on a pool deck, who made a regrettable, reflexive error in judgment after weeks of verbal provocation from the Merritts, who have demonstrated an ongoing pattern of defiance against the very rules that protect their home value." Vance called Gerald and Brenda the former board members. They were terrified, stumbling through their testimony, trying desperately to minimize their liability to the HOA while avoiding perjury. They admitted Penelope was difficult and demanding, but insisted the push looked like a momentary loss of balance, not deliberate malice. The nadir of the defense came when Vance cross-examined Arthur Merritt. Arthur, seated in his chair, faced the jury with the quiet dignity of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Professor Merritt," Vance began, his tone dripping with condescension, "you testified that on the day of the incident you told Ms. Thorne, and I quote, that she was a ghoul who had traded her existence for a clipboard. Is that correct?" "It is," Arthur replied calmly. "It was a statement of fact, not a provocation." "A fact?" "You admit to insulting the woman who was trying to enforce community safety protocols. You admit to verbally assaulting her on the pool deck. And when she reacted, perhaps by reaching out to steady a chair that you had dangerously misaligned, you fell, and now you seek to profit, demanding millions in civil compensation." "I fell because she violently shoved the chair," Arthur stated, his voice unwavering, meeting Vance's gaze. "I seek compensation for the loss of dignity and the physical trauma caused by a woman who believes her personal authority outweighs my right to safety and accessibility." Alex watched the jury. Vance was successfully muddying the water, appealing to the jurors' own potential distrust of lawyers and their secret resentment of demanding neighbors. They needed the DA to land the decisive blow. Prosecutor Marcus Chen, young and meticulous, reserved his opening witness for the day the video would be shown, Dr. Helena Reyes. The attending physician at the ER, Dr. Reyes, testified that the injuries, specifically the contusion pattern and the lack of defensive wounds, were consistent with a sudden, lateral blow to the base of the chair, not an accidental slip. When a person falls from a standing position, they instinctively brace. Professor Merritt's position, based on our X-rays, indicated a sudden, uncontrolled external force to his center of gravity. The emotional climax, however, was saved for Alex's testimony. Alex detailed the agonizing daily reality of his father's MS, the small victories of a swim, the absolute necessity of the transfer ritual. When she pushed him, Alex said, his voice quiet, controlled, yet thick with bottled grief. She didn't just push a chair. She pushed a man who, for those 20 minutes a day, was floating free from his own broken body. She took away his sanctuary, and she almost took his life. The helplessness, the panic in his eyes, that's what I remember most. She saw his disability and tried to drown it. Then came the centerpiece of the prosecution's case, the video. Justice Hayes allowed the footage to be played once, in absolute silence. As the pixels confirmed the horrifying truth, a low, undeniable murmur of distress spread across the jury box. They saw Penelope's face transform from haughty to feral, the furious intent behind the shove, and the brutal, helpless impact. When the video ended, Chen didn't say a word. He simply turned to the jury and rested his case. Vance, now visibly sweating, frantically called Penelope back to the stand for a tearful, prepared statement of remorse and regret, attempting to recast the incident as a tragic misunderstanding fueled by her own exhaustion from HOA duties, but the damage was done. The truth, visible in high definition, had bypassed the legal smoke and mirrors. While the jury was deliberating, Sarah Peterson cornered Gerald and Brenda in the hallway. They had the civil suit pending against the HOA seeking millions. "We don't need the civil trial, Gerald," Sarah stated, her eyes hard. "We have the criminal verdict incoming, but we will settle with the board right now, today, to save you and the community from punitive damages." Gerald looked wretched. "What are the terms?" 1. The HOA pays the full cost of Arthur's past and future medical care related to the assault. 2. The HOA pays Alex and Arthur a substantial settlement for pain and suffering. 3. The HOA will immediately allocate funds for permanent, certified ADA-compliant improvements to the pool, including a functioning lift and a dedicated, unobstructed transfer zone, monitored by a community oversight committee. And 4, Alex added, stepping forward, his voice calm, "The Merritts will sell our home to the HOA for fair market value, and we will move out of Cypress Creek Estates within 90 days. The last term stunned them. You're leaving?" Brenda whispered, her eyes wide. "We won the fight for justice, but the community is toxic," Alex explained. "We don't want the pool anymore. We want peace. Gerald, if you agree to these terms, the civil suit against the association is dismissed, effective immediately. You save the community millions and end the toxicity. You save yourselves." Gerald looked at Brenda, who gave a resigned nod. He signed the agreement, a sigh of pure, desperate relief escaping him. The HOA was financially penalized and legally obligated to change, but the Merritts were finally free. The jury returned their verdict after only 4 hours. The courtroom was silent as death. The foreman stood. "On the charge of felony battery on an elderly or disabled person, how does the jury find?" "We, the jury, find the defendant, Penelope Thorne, guilty." Penelope Thorne's composure evaporated completely. She let out a choked, inhuman sound, not of despair, but of raw, absolute disbelief that the world she had created to protect herself had finally, utterly failed her. She collapsed into her chair, gasping. Sentencing was scheduled 2 weeks later. Justice Hayes was severe. She cited the vulnerability of the victim, the malice of the intent, the attempted destruction of evidence, and the defendant's lack of genuine remorse, only regret for being caught. Penelope Thorne was sentenced to 3 years in state prison with 10 years of supervised probation, and ordered to pay restitution matching the civil settlement amount. The final, devastating blow of justice and karma came 3 months later, delivered on a sunny, cool afternoon. Having sold their home to the HOA as part of the settlement, Alex and Arthur were packing the last boxes into a moving van, bound for a quiet coastal town known for its accessible infrastructure and ocean views. Arthur, sitting outside their empty home, looked across the perfectly manicured lawn to the grand, imposing house belonging to Penelope Thorne. The house, her temple of status and superiority, now carried a stark, heavy foreclosure notice nailed prominently to the front door, a final, inescapable consequence of the colossal legal fees and the massive bail bond she couldn't meet. "Look at that, Alex," Arthur murmured, a faint, almost pitying smile touching his lips. "The ultimate HOA violation. She lost her own home." Alex loaded the last box of history books. He walked over to his father and knelt beside him. "She tried to drown you, Dad. Now her pride is sunk." He pushed Arthur's chair toward the ramp of the moving van, no longer rushing, no longer afraid. "Ready to go, Professor?" Arthur breathed deeply, letting the weight of the past year fall away. "Ready to swim where the only rule is the tide." "Son." The last thing they saw in the rearview mirror was the foreclosure notice fluttering gently on the door of the house that once held the self-proclaimed Queen of Cypress Creek Estates. Penelope Thorne was behind bars, her community destroyed and her property confiscated. The rule of law had prevailed over the rule of the HOA. End of Part 5.